Hey everyone, Boulevard here. I just want to go ahead and give you an update on what you're looking at here because this Tournament Tactician probably looks very long. So what happened is for the last couple of weeks, I've been going live on Twitch on Thursday at about 6 p.m. Eastern, and I've been sort of crowdsourcing Twitch chat to help me with the tier list. Now, this has been pretty successful because there are a lot of things that are slipping through the cracks, especially with lack of tournament data, and especially, coming into a new meta with not a lot of helpful ladder data floating around. So if you want to be a part of that, definitely check me out on Twitch TV/casterboulevard on Thursdays at 6 p.m. Eastern. And yeah, so what I'm doing this time around is I'm just uploading the entire raw VOD because there's a lot of backtracking, a lot more freeform discussion because it is, being live streamed on Twitch. So I know a lot of you listen to this sort of podcast style. So what I'm looking for right now is feedback on whether this is just entirely too long or if you would like me to cut it down, because I'd probably have to cut it down and go back and grab some things and put them forward and kind of move it out of order. So before I commit to that, I just want to see how people feel about just the long form raw VOD being uploaded. So please let me know what you think in the comments so that I know what you want out of the future, because this is about an hour long. So please enjoy this week's Tournament Tactician on the opening week of patch 4.4. Today we are once again doing the tournament tier list. So the plan is every Thursday for the foreseeable future at 6 p.m. Eastern. But we're building out the tier list for the weekend, which is difficult because, again, tier 1 got nerfed, half of tier 2 got nerfed, half of it didn't, and then, these got some light buffs in the form of Soul Harvest going down a mana, which isn't nothing because it means that you hit Vayne for 3 mana instead of 4, and Malphite, and I guess technically level 1 Talia. That doesn't feel as impactful. But the point is, I can't even go to Runeterra AR to find stuff because these are just all the decks from last format. We haven't really gotten into catching up to even if I go to current patch. Yeah, the sample sizes are really small. Usually if you're looking at last 2 days and you're looking at the number 1 deck and the matches played, if it's a meta and people are playing the game, you're usually looking at at least 10,000 games. I'm not too surprised to see, we're just shy of 10,000 games on the last 2 days because, end of a meta, things are kind of stale. But it really doesn't seem like the top decks getting nerfed have brought the power level down enough to get people off of them. I'm trying to feel, what is even the newest deck if I'm scrolling down here? This was a known factor. It's it's Teemo Tristana, right? This is, the newest deck that people are playing, and 162 games? Jesus. With only a 55% win rate, what the hell? That's not good. 43 games, 46% win rate? Oh, no. Oh, no, that's not good. We don't want to be looking at that. Is this okay, yeah, this is the Bandle Gunners thing. I get it. People trying out the new buff, but even this, only 1,000 matches played in the last 2 days? That's nothing, because I'm still... Okay, I'm on current patch. But yeah, current patch is... It's been 36 plus hours. Not quite 2 days, but a little over a day and a half. Talia Malphite, yeah, Caitlyn's... Jesus, yeah. Oof. People really trying out Sundisk again. This is what you'll love to see, though. At least it's not a Rise deck. I heard Majin made a new Rise video, so I'm scared of the implications for that. Oh, no, I was going to say I don't see a Rise deck, but here it is. Oh, God. 46, that's a lot higher than Sundisk. That's scary, guys. I don't like that. Yeah, Jack Seraphine continues to decline. Dedicated Nasus decks seem to be touched on again, but honestly, 175 players globally is not something I can really draw conclusions off of. So I just exited out of the tier. I was trying to figure out what I exited out of. It was the tier list. Yeah, so I think that generally you should always be focusing on nerfs more than buffs, because the way I see it is you should nerf everything down to a similar power level, and then either... The problem is they never buff things in decks that were already doing okay. They only buff things out of archetypes that were unplayable. And it feels like they very rarely get those buffs right on the first try. I would have preferred to see hey, this deck is doing okay. It's sitting at a 52% win rate, Can you really argue that any unit change on 1 attack or 1 health is going to bump that thing up to a 55% win rate? If I gave 1 more attack to... I guess that's the thing, though, right? Is if it's not buffing at 2-3%, then, did your buff even really matter? So I guess that's where it all kind of balances out. But essentially, yeah, so if people are... So people on ladder are unhelpful is sort of the conclusion that I'm drawing off of this. I can't really look at all of this data and figure out how well this translates into the tournament scene. I can look at this and try to figure it out. but it's hard to know the actual power level of what these came down to. I know that people were already kind of not the biggest fan of the Fizz Samira Noxus Leona lineup. Like, it had success in the Runeterra Open, but it didn't really feel like people were jumping onto this one for the long haul. Like, we weren't going to just constantly see, 60% of your opponents running Fizz Samira plus Noxus Leona. And even Red Pup were like, yeah, the Noxus Leona was one of the weaker portions of our lineup. You do kind of feel like you're missing the Samira. The Kale and the Diana are not like super suitable replacements. And with the nerfs that Leona caught, I think that she does fall down a tier at least. And a big reason for that is, one, that extra health. Like, these were the very impactful nerfs. The one health on that Sun Guardian, as well as that, like, that one level up on Leona. You were constantly just like, there were times you were playing Leona unleveled. She would come down and she'd be like 2 or 3. You were just playing more of a Noxus early game or something along those lines, or like getting down your Samira, your Diana, or whatever. So I think like Leona lost some of the, not the most, but quite a lot, especially because she was not the preferred Samira deck. She was the like, oh, we don't have to play Samira in this deck, to the point where if you look at the meta, I don't even think you see, yeah, she's down to like number 6, which she's only doing that because she's on ladder, right? It's now like easily the least popular Samira list, whereas previously it was the most popular, and you're not going to see people like making the considerations that they do in tournament that they do on ladder, which is to say that like this deck is a stronger version than the tournament deck, and it is still only sitting at like a 51% win, like down a 4%. Yeah, the Sun Guardian and the Leona nerfs I think were absolutely massive, so I'm not too surprised to see this one falling down this much. Probably put that in tier 2. The real question is, like, does this go down to tier 2, or has it fallen all the way to tier 3? Fizz Samira, Karma Set. I think Karma Set's still going to be tier 1. It got touched, but not really enough. When you look at the actual implications of a 3 health Karma, and you look at some of the other decks here, like Frostbite midrange not doing anything additional off of that 3 health, it does mean that it's harder for Karma to block, but they had kind of already cut Avaros and Trapper, so you weren't really looking at any 3... Ignore that. This is an outdated list. It's an outdated sample. They've cut Avaros and Trappers, so you're really not seeing Karma getting in that free chump block anymore. Sam Varus and Karma Set Targon are up a tier. Samira Varus is already... Oh, yeah, Samira Varus definitely goes up a tier. But I don't think the Karma health nerf is... When we're looking at everything else, like Frostbite Midrange doesn't care that you went down to 3 health. Talia Malphite, I don't think does either. I think all their shit dealt 4 damage as well, because it was just Stonebreaker, right? So now it can kill... Like, now it can kill level 2 Karma, but I think if you were getting the level 2 Karma against Talia Malphite, you were probably winning anyway, unless, like, you were blowing them over with the Malphite level up. So, like, I think it was impactful, but I'm not seeing anything specifically in the meta where it was a huge deal, other than Deep can now throw down a Devourer onto an unleveled Karma. But that doesn't feel like a super common situation, right? Yeah, I think even though the Momentous nerf was big, it's like this is still just the deck to beat. Even when we look at ladder for like this meta, it's still, yeah, it's down a 3% win rate from 60. It's still very much the deck to beat. I think this is definitely what the meta is still revolving around when we look into a tournament weekend. Pantheon's, I'm about, get out of my fucking chat, Pantheon Samira. Is that better than Samira Leona? It's gotta be, right? Pantheon is still just does Pantheon things. But are you getting bigger than the other mid-range? Are you even fucking leveling Pantheon in that deck? Like, how are you playing into, like, this portion of the meta as a Pantheon Samira deck? The 58th out of 59 decks. We have Pantheon Samira. The most played games is 17 in the last 36 hours. Holy shit, is this not something I can really pull data off of? The Targon Telestone buff was something. It went from not exist, like the card didn't exist, now the card might exist. Eula got changed as well, right? Like draws a champion now or something. I didn't get a chance to do a patch or like a nerf buff review, so these are a little foggy to me. Did I dream up the Eula change? Was that on someone's wish list? Did I? Oh, maybe I think what happened was I think I saw this card and I saw the picture, and because I didn't know Priestess of Desert Light existed, I thought this was Eula. Yeah, dude, I do be hallucinating. I've been out of it all week. I like went to a party Saturday night and I just have not physically or mentally recovered since. I have like bruises on my armpits from getting deadlifted. So I haven't even been able to like work out really. It's been a rough week. Okay, so it can target itself. I do if people are still going to be jamming Karma Set in a high presence, then I definitely don't hate running a deck with this many spell shields. Because assuming that you're still trying to kill them before, they actually get into the portion of the game where Karma's leveled, at that point things get a lot rougher. But you're looking at like 5-mana tag outs and 4-mana concussive palms to try and slow you down a little bit. So that is like a big commitment for them to try and remove all the spell shields and stuff. So yeah, I think that like if Karma's Set is still going to be a tier 1 deck, I definitely think that maybe not Samira Pantheon, but I definitely think a Pantheon deck. I'm not convinced that it's this one. What if we go back to like, all right, cut the Samira. What if we go Varus Pantheon? No, because I think everybody's issue with the Varus side of things right now is the nerf onto a Momentous Choice, which I still think is getting blown out of proportion a wee bit. Not a lot, but a wee bit at least. What are we looking at here, though? This is just like I can't really draw any conclusions off of this. Pantheon is definitely something to keep in mind, though. I would not be surprised if there's a Pantheon deck that's gonna like show up pretty big this weekend. I don't think any of these. Oh, we'll get to tier 3 later. We got to get through this first. So this definitely stays where it is. I think that because the other, like, when we look at what was doing well, the decks that weren't touched were mid-range decks that were supposed to not be doing well in the Frostbite mid-range. Frostbite mid-range was not beating these decks. If it was, just kind of spitballing here, assuming, like, Frostbite mid-range was beating mid-range because of what Frostbite did, not because Ash was turbo leveling or your Reckonings were so smoothly on curve, right? Oh, you know what? Hold on. I need to... I think my camera is cutting off chat. I would like to fix that. Okay, perfect. Probably move this down a little bit. There we go. Okay. So yeah, Frostbite midrange should still be beating everything it was beating previously on the midrange side of things because they were just losing to like Harsh Wind's Flash Freeze, not like Ash leveling too quickly or Reckoning coming down on 6 mana. I think you had a little bit more leeway. So I think Frostbite midrange is still going to be a rather popular archetype in tournament, especially when you're looking to play against like more Aatrox Vein, more deep stuff like that. Thalia Malphite, I think these decks just are all fine. I don't necessarily know that any of these move up to tier 1. Aatrox Vein might, but the problem with Aatrox Vein always has sort of been its like general inconsistencies of you're running a lot of weapons, and in an unavoidable amount of games you are just going to run into hands where you are drawing all weapons or no weapons, and you really need like a healthy mix. So I've never been the biggest fan of Vein Aatrox as like a tier 1 deck. I think that its inconsistencies catch up to it like way too often, and it's one of those decks where you're gonna bring it, you're going to watch someone else do well with it, and you're sitting here with a handful of weapons like, ah, shit, why did I bring this stupid deck? The general consensus I keep hearing about Noxus Varus is that, like, it's gone down. It would have been tier 0. This is, like, the general consensus I keep hearing is this would have been tier 0 if Momentous Choice was still 1 mana. And I think... How do I want to put this? I think you are fucking out of your mind if you thought this deck was going to be tier 0, and you also think the Momentous nerf knocks it down to, like, tier 3. I think you're out of your fucking mind if that's the line of logic that you want to follow. But is anything strong enough to... Alright, here's the question. Here's question 1. Let's get this out of the way. Is Karma Set still tier 1? I think the answer is yes. The nerfs that it took were Karma to 3 health and Drum Solo reduced by 1 instead of 2, Caustic Riff up to 4 mana instead of 3. Right, that's it? It was just those 3? You're still the triple high note, triple Mystic Shot deck. Tag Out is still a broken card. Set is still a broken card. Yeah, I didn't think it ran Drum Solo. I think they were more on like the formula and All Out. Did All Out change? Oh, you're still talking about Samira. Donut, we're talking about set karma right now. It's time to talk about set karma. We'll talk about Samira in a minute. But for now, we have to get through set karma. Is this deck still tier 1? My gut says yes. My gut says that, like, the broken, like, karma, or not karma, rather, but, like, well, yeah, karma's broken too, but, like, set and tag out are, like, some of the more broken cards in the deck. If karma set isn't tier 1, it's because of the meta shifting, not because it's bad. Yeah, I could see that. I'm willing to keep this one up in tier 1, say that, like, this is probably still an auto-include for a lot of players that are good at the deck. This is something that you're going to be running into a lot. You would expect to see multiple copies of this in top 8. You don't think Karma set was tier 1 last patch? Donut, please tell me you're still talking about... Oh, God. Oh, my God. I actually do have time to get into the argument of how dumb it is to say that RPG proved that it was super beatable. Y'all are not RPG. So just because, like, 5 people can beat this doesn't mean everybody can beat this. And just because 5 people can beat it doesn't mean it's not a tier 1 deck. Because you are still trying to, like, top the event, right? And Karma Set, I think, still gave you one of the best opportunities to do that. Hold on, let me check something real quick. America's 2023 seasonals, Glory and Navori April Open, Control F Donut. Oh, you did make it. Samira Fizz, Jack Seraphine, Leona Kale Ribbon. Okay, so you were on the Jack Seraphine, Leona Kale, Samira Fizz. And then I don't have a bracket. Do I have a bracket? I don't think I have a bracket. Get away with it this time. Oh, it's not important. So Karma Set's still tier 1. We'll leave it there, and I'm putting the hammer down on that one. I still expect this to take up... It's so hard in Legends of Runeterra where, like, if I were to say, like, hey, a deck is tier 1, how many of those would you assume that you would see in a top 8? I'm saying you're out of your fucking mind for not thinking Karma was tier 1. But the point is, like, if a deck is tier 1, and tier 1 is very small, it's like 2, 3, maybe 4 decks, and people are bringing 3 decks, I think on average you should be expecting like 5 of those in top 8, and that is just not the case we get with Legends of Runeterra. It's actually very rare for a deck to take more than half of a top 8. Usually, if you're looking at a top 8, like 1 deck will be a 4 of, maybe 2 decks will be a 4 of, but a lot of your tier 1s are sitting in like your 3 of, 2 of section, and I definitely think you're going to see 2 to 3 Karma Set in top 8 at, I think Saturday Scramble is the tournament that we have going on. I think that's what people are entering. I don't know if it's going to reach 64 players. If it doesn't reach 64 players, then, like, you know, I put a little bit less weight on it, but I still think that Karma Set is going to show up in, 2 to 3 of the lineups, especially with, like, how many nerfs the Samira Varus took. Like, Fizz Samira, I think, if you bring Fizz Samira, then I think people are just like... It was 5. It was 5, so the Mastering Runeterra Open, it was 5 Samira Leona, and then 3 Samira Fizz. Yeah. I don't know why I'm getting Fizz and Samira's names mixed up. But yeah, that was definitely an anomaly. You don't see that very often, where a champion takes 8 out of 8. In fact, you only ever saw it one time other than that. But people tend to greatly overestimate... Oh, like the open? Oh, I don't know top 8 stats because I don't have a bracket. But I know that it took up... It was like 36. It was the only deck that took up more than half of the top 64 was Noxus Leona. So that's that. But yeah, I could see the consensus here seems to be like Fizz Samira didn't lose as much as Varus Samira. That doesn't even feel right to say because, well, I guess like the nerfs was less impactful, right? People seem to think that like there's this huge difference on the one man on Momentous Choice. I haven't heard as much buzz about like the 1 health on Inferna. That said, Fizz Samira is the one that was main decking All Out, and I do think that All Out was like one of the best cards in that deck. So, isn't it even called All Out? It's called All Out, right? What's the name of this card? All Out. Okay, yeah. This was the only one main decking All Out. Like, Varus didn't play it. Usually, Leona didn't play it. So, like, the All Out nerf, I think, is pretty impactful. The Inferna nerf, I think, is, like, kind of whatever. That's a good point, Donut. The monkey version is something that players really got off of, and then they're talking about, like, oh, you know, I think someone was describing, I think it was Drussoth was describing that like it auto wins the Frostbite mid-range matchup. And I think that even though Frostbite mid-range got nerfed a little bit, I think it's still going to be one of the more popular tournament decks. I don't think it moves down a tier. I think it's still a tier 2 deck. I think it's like totally fine. Oh, the Ambitious Cultist nerf? Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Because the only other deck that was playing this was probably like Aatrox Kane. And it's really funny to me that like Vayne Aatrox did not get touched at all, and yet Aatrox Kane, the significantly worse version, like caught a couple of strays here. Where just like Momentous and Ambitious Cultists get nerfed. So like Kane Aatrox is like super dead, but I think Vayne Aatrox is still like a very good choice. So I'd say Fizz is probably still tier 1. If we go back to these stats. Look, I hope nobody plays Vayne Aatrox. It's a very boring deck to cast. But the real, I think like the question of the weekend really is just which one of these survived better. And I don't really have a strong opinion either way. I've played very little of these decks. They are not my style, and we can't really just look at like old tournament data to be like, hey, you know, Fizz Samira was outperforming Noxus Varus, because I think once RPG won with Noxus Varus, that like then people really clicked for people of like, oh yeah, like this is the build. We all kind of knew it was like the anti-Samira build, but does Momentous Choice change that? Does it make it less consistent into, you know, the other Samira decks that we're seeing? I'm like, I'm really not feeling it one way or the other on these two. I think that they're both like still fine. One of them is probably better, but I do not have a strong opinion on which one it is. Yeah, I think like Aatrox, Deep Tilium, Malphite are still all like good. In fact, they should be better positioned than they were previously. The difference is like if this becomes the meta, that's a lot easier to counter than what we had previously. So I'm kind of hoping that, you know, because Control did get a buff. The Soul Harvest buff is not nothing, especially considering that there are a couple of like 3 attack champions running around. Vayne first and foremost. So yeah, maybe we will see like a resurgence in Control, but I don't think that would be a this weekend thing. I think like this weekend, we're looking more at people flocking to the decks that weren't nerfed, and then should those prove to take up a significant portion of the top 8, then we'll look to counter that next week. So I think this week, like, it's really just about figuring out what, or at least on my end, like, it's about figuring out what Samira deck is actually the best one. SI Control will not rise up unless Karma moves out. Deep is going up quite a bit now that people see how strong it is after rotation. Yeah, I think, especially with Deep not catching any nerfs, and arguably actually getting a buff because they can play Soul Harvest. But I don't know that it's stronger than Tier 2. That's really the question for me right now is, I'm going to leave both of these in Tier 1 and not really, like, put my foot down on this just because I don't have a strong opinion, and I'm really not, like, looking to do this to have, like, I'm not looking to have a strong opinion for the sake of having one. I'm really unsure, and I think they're comparable enough that I'm just gonna like take a step back, let the tournament speak for itself, and kind of go from there. It's kind of where I'm landing on this. And then I don't think Vayne Aatrox might be Tier 1. I thought Vayne Aatrox was Tier 1 the first week after rotation, and it only took like one top 8 spot, and I ended up like looking kind of goofy for that, but I feel like I was closer on that than I was on like a couple of the other things. So yeah, I could see Aatrox Vayne moving up, actually, especially if people are trying to move more towards Control, just because they're like, you know, if anyone takes a step back and looks at this, just at these colors, right? And they're like, okay, yeah, like all the Samira decks got nerfed. None of the mid-range decks got nerfed, which means it's time to play Control and just like triple vengeance out the threats of these decks. Like, I think Aatrox Vayne does very well into Control because of the Darken, especially Zolani. Like, you just end up Zolani looping, and that's something that a lot of it depends on how slow the Control deck is. But again, yeah, I think someone in chat made a good point about, like, as long as Karma is around, you know, it is a little dicey to go full Control, because you are probably still going to run into Karma set and Samira lineups this weekend. So we'll sit this. We'll sit that. We could call this Tier 1. I wouldn't be mad at putting Aatrox Vayne in Tier 1. But it's not something I have a strong opinion on. But it does feel weird to only have two different decks that are playable, quote unquote, in tier 1, because I'd like at very least to be able to give you a lineup of like, hey, you know, you come in here with absolutely no knowledge and you're like, oh, like what lineup should I be running this weekend? Usually I like to have 3 decks that I can go like, okay, bam, boom, bop. So if Karmaset and a Samira deck is your starting line still, you know, what is the third deck? Because I don't really think it's Jack Seraphine, because they did play drum solo and, you know, they were very much a Caustic Riff deck, and now that that's gotten taken down a peg, like I think Jack Seraphine is still fine in tier 2. I don't think it's going up to tier 1 based on this. I think, yeah, you know what, Donut, you're selling me on myself here. I think I will move Aatrox Vein. I think if I were to suggest a deck for like a third deck in your lineup, I think Aatrox Vein is probably what I would recommend. Just because I don't think Deep Intilia Malphite are moving. I don't think Frostbite midrange is moving. Frostbite SI, Sedge Samira, and Liss Aesol control. Well, I can't help you with that one. That is some wild boy shit. And that's like the beauty of a tier list, right? Is like you can come out here and you can just ignore everything I say and then run Frostbite SI, Sejuani Samira, and Liss Aesol control. Like that's perfectly reasonable thing to do, right? The whole point of a tier list isn't like, this isn't the Bibble. You're not supposed to read this and go, yep, gotta run the tier 1 decks. Otherwise, I wouldn't bother with anything below tier 1. But I think competent Aatrox Vein players should still be putting up numbers this weekend. I think that if I had to guess on like what a top 8 is going to look like, I think you're still looking at 3 to 4 Karmaset. No, you were never looking at 4 Karmaset. I lied. Even when like Karmaset was good, like you were still only seeing like 3 of it in the top 8. Talia Malf does get tall. I don't know how the Talia Malf deep matchup goes, and I'm worried that because the patch just reset, the stats on Lore Master is not going to show up unless I look at the last patch. But I think these are like fine to stay where they are. The real question is like, is Noxus Leona even playable at this point? Because I'm leaning no. Yeah, the good crash course. Well, there's not like a great crash course on what you missed, but there is a good crash course on what is happening now, which is where exactly you have found yourself like smack dab in the middle of, is trying to figure out, okay, patch dropped 2 days ago. A lot of the good decks got nerfed, so where do we stand now? That's what we're literally in the middle of figuring out. So you were in the perfect place, Echo. Yeah, Talia Malphite and Deep are just like, throw down obnoxiously large champion. If you can't deal with it, I probably win the game. And Malphite is definitely better at solo taking over the game than not Malphite. Yeah, Malphite is better at solo taking over the game than Nautilus is, because Nautilus needs the other things. So I actually am working on a crash course video on the Comp 2.0. It'll probably be out on like Monday. And I'm going to try to, because it's a very long article, it's pretty dense. I'm going to try to explain it in like 2 to 3 minutes just so that people can get a leg up on it. I wanted to do it this week, but as I mentioned earlier, I've just been kind of dead this week, so I haven't been able to like do anything. This is the first piece of content I'm putting out this week. I feel awful about it, but it is what it is. Say Maokai's a bigger threat? Yeah, I mean, like, if people are going to be still on Karmaset and, like, Samira got taken down a peg, then I think, like, Maokai is a pretty viable win condition. Yeah, so I was saying, I think, last meta, like, right before the open, that I was pretty sure there's a Seraphine deck that we haven't found yet. I don't know what it is, but until someone finds it, I'm not really going to be the one speculating about it and being like, yeah, you know, in tier 1, we have a Seraphine deck with an unknown second champion, an unknown region combination, and I'm like, I feel it in my bones that it exists. So, can't really speak too much to the undiscovered Seraphine deck, but I also do feel that it exists. I don't think... Does Noxus Leona still exist? Is this something people are going to be bringing to events? I don't think so, man. Curious if you plan to use any AI language models for scripts like that. Do you think it would make my workload easier? I am not a big AI guy. Probably just like the start and stop of it. I also, even when I write my own scripts, I tend to go off script a lot just because things flow better in the moment for me. So even if I had, you know, something like that, probably wouldn't end up using it. Yeah, I did notice that a lot of times when Sun Guardian was like stalwarting out a board, it was living at exactly 1 HP, and Leona was constantly coming down like unleveled already. I don't think it's broken enough that people are going to be on. I guess the best way to put this is I do not think you are going to see an unnamed player on Noxus Leona plus a Samira deck. I'll even say like top 16ing this weekend. I think it would just be like someone who is very good at Legends of Runeterra skill gapping someone despite having a mediocre lineup if they are on Noxus Leona plus a Samira deck, making it to the top 16 or the top 8. I think that's the only situation where it happens. So I think I do want to put Noxus Leona in tier 3. Which makes our tier 2 a lot smaller, which is fine. I think, is Jack Seraphine still tier 2 is a good question. When we look at the ladder stats for it, I think it's fallen down to like a 46% win rate. And it's never had an insane win rate on ladder, but it has constantly been going down, which is a little like, I don't know if these are supposed to be top pilots or what, but we've got 30 games at a 42% win rate, 20 games at a 42% win rate, and 30 games at a 43% win rate. And then Pastry is over here just carrying the entire archetype, apparently. And I don't know if that's just, like, if these are supposed to be the top pilots, and the top pilot is a 43% win rate, what the hell, man? That deck sucks then. That said, though, Jack Seraphine does very well into Frostbite midrange. And if we are still expecting, or at least theorizing, that there's a good chance that a lot of people just like go back to the midrange dogfight, then Jack Seraphine should do pretty well into that. The stats tab? Okay. Do any of these say stats? I don't use this website enough. Or do I actually have to like go over to stats? Karma set, Varsamira, deep. What was I looking for again? Oh yeah, did I pass it? No, here it is. Okay, here we go. There we go. You were right. I don't know what it's, I don't know like what, I don't know how it picked the people to put up there if it's not top pilots, but no, you're right. Those were not the top pilots. Now we get some people over the last couple of days with some, 65% win rates, which, like, honestly, this is, like, the bare minimum for a top pilot on a lot of decks. And I know Drissoth has been saying this for a while, but, that could be it, yeah. That's weird. Yeah. So anyway, the point is, 65% win rate is actually really low for a top pilot. It's like the lower end of what you would expect, which Drissoth's been talking about for a while as something that Jack Seraphine falls into. Yeah, I know. I came early, though, but, it is what it is. I got out of work early, so I started stream early. Even though it's got, like, this is a deck that has always had a lower win rate for its top pilots, similar to Echo Jinx. Echo decks have just always had, like, low ladder win rates for their top pilots. But Jack Seraphine is still a very threatening deck. I don't think it's moving down to tier 3. I think it's still fine at tier 2. I think it still hoses Frostbite midrange, which is kind of something that you care about. I think it still does very well into, some of the other midrange decks. There's still just like not an insane amount of keg interaction running around. I think Jack Seraphine will be fine. I think its popularity is going to fall off. I wouldn't be surprised if you only see 1 or 2 of these in the top 8 this weekend. Previously, we were looking at like 3. It was like comparable numbers to Karma Set. I think we're down from that. I think it's only going to be 1 or 2. But I also expect like 0 to 2 Talia Malphite in top 8. Like Talia Malphite, even though I think it's a solid deck, I don't even think is guaranteed to top 8. People are just like, there's only so many decks in the game. Some of them are better. You got to have a good reason to run Talia Malphite. And a lot of people aren't like taking their Karma Set deck and their Samira deck and then going, oh yeah, Talia Malphite is my third deck. That's just not what players going for the tier 1 stuff are usually doing. So Talia Malphite tends to be in a little bit more of like an off lineup or a little bit more counter focused on a specific matchup. And you just don't really see people doing those very often in the opening weekend of a patch on grassroots tournaments. So I think that even though Talia Malphite is not going to have a very high presence this week, I definitely think it's something that you need to keep your eye on as one of the taller mid-range decks in the meta that can still go toe-to-toe with like Deep or Aatrox Varus or even like Stonewall out the early game that has been nerfed a little bit out of some of these other decks. Like the fact that Talia, like Noxus Leona just probably isn't a factor anymore means that your sort of mediocre mid-game boards actually have a lot more staying power against some of the more aggressive decks in the meta because they're not just getting like Sunhawked into Leona, into Ravoon Sunhawk, Leona. It's like you're not just getting stunned out like you were previously. So all this to say, Talia Malphite, still a good deck. Do not expect to see it in top 8 this weekend. It'd be nice if it happened, but I'm, next week when we're doing this again and people are coming in and they're like, why is Talia Malphite in tier 2? Didn't you look at the top 8 of the Saturday Scramble? There weren't any in there. I'm warning you now. It's staying in there, all right? Trust me on this one. Down the line, unless things drastically shift, unless Talia Malphite doesn't even get to slip into the mid-range meta before Control starts to take back over, that's a possibility. But trust me. Trust me on this one. Even if you don't see it this weekend, Talia Malphite staying in tier 2. Deep staying, Jack Seraphine staying. I don't think the control decks are moving up just yet. I think people are still going to hang on to this stuff a little bit too much. Oh yeah, that was, you were asking about the Bandle Samira stuff. So like, that's something that I haven't really been able to get a read on just yet. Like, hello? I know you scroll down further than this. Don't just show me the top 10 decks. What the hell? All right, Runeterra AR broke. Hold on. Now it's only giving me the top 5. Okay, there we go. No, I want more than the top 10. There we go. I had to full screen it? That's kind of weird. But that fixed it. Yeah, I think Teemo Tristana was the first one. And it's one of those things where, like, there's just not a lot of people playing it, so it's, like, hard to get stats on. It's also just, like, baseline kind of hard to look at a ladder deck with 3 might in it and try to figure out where it's going to be in a tournament setting. Because might is an inherently cheesy card. And we've seen a good number of might strategies perform well in tournaments before. I don't think that makes them any less cheesy. Samira Leona was a triple might deck. There were a lot of Riven decks in the past have been triple might decks. There was like Riven Vi, Riven Victor, pretty much any Riven Fizz. Like there have just been a lot of Riven might decks in the past that have kind of like taken me down a peg or two on just seeing this in a general strategy. But overall, I think someone in chat was right. Like, it's going to take a little bit more time to figure out, like, the right numbers. I definitely think that you will see this in Top Cut, and so I would like to at least, like, put this in Tier 3 so that people are aware that it exists when they look at the tier list and be like, oh, yes, the sole new deck on the tier list. It's like Noxus Bandle City. Champions. Fuck if I know. And then we'll, after I turn off stream, then I'll go and actually, like, look for a good sample list to put on here. I don't think this, the leaderboard function in client has updated enough for me to go in there and just, like, grab, okay, yeah, someone in the top 10 is playing this. I think it'll still just be showing all their Samira decks. But I definitely think that this is one of the surprise factor decks that could show up. Just some kind of Bandle Gunner deck. Can you triple Bandle Gunner a lineup? I don't think so. But does Jack's Bandle Gunners even show up on this? If I sort by, that's not it. Win rate. Our Teemo Tristana. Oh, there's Pantheon. Oh, it's Pantheon Varus too, not even Pantheon Samira. Narnora. No, this probably isn't. No, this is still broad main control. Teemo Tristana. Samira Tristana. Ooh. We're getting kind of down there now. Jack's Horn is still up there. Still don't respect it. Nick might be playing it, like, in the tournament. Does Nick know how to sign up for a tournament? Is he physically capable of doing that? I was unaware. Evolution, what the hell? Yeah, we're really getting down here now. Yeah, I think we've gone past the point of helpful information on this one. Jax doesn't seem to be popping up as a Bandle Gunner thing. But like I said, I'll dig into this because this will go up on YouTube tomorrow, and between now and then, I'll figure something out. But one of the I'm always kind of down on the idea of like taking really unpopular decks and putting them on the tier list, because this is supposed to give you an overview of the meta. So if I like put something on here that like 10 people are playing, I'm not actually giving you a good overview of the meta, because you're supposed to be able to look at this and be like, okay, this is what I need to be looking out for. This is a relative power strength of like, because the tiers do also sort of represent popularity, right? Like, you're going to be seeing a lot of Karma Set. You're going to be seeing a lot of Samira. From there, it's a little more questionable. I think Aatrox Vayne is like a solid enough deck that like you're going to be seeing a bunch of this Frostbite midrange. Like, tier 3 decks are definitely where we start to get into the more fringe stuff, but even I have a limit on like how fringe I'm going to put stuff in there. Does Gwen Quinn still exist? That's something I want to talk about. Now that we're kind of getting down into tier 3, like, I think Nora Vygar, sure, Echo Jinx could probably come off the tier list, but I think that it's one of those things that you need to keep in your back pocket, especially because this is one of those decks that was previously doing very poorly into the top end of the meta, but was actually doing pretty good into the mid-range stuff, like the Aatrox Vayne, the Deep, the Tilium Malphite, things that just like don't have enough removal for the Echo, or are just playing board-based strategies where I just get to like ram my entire board into yours, go for the rally, and that is a game-ending play instead of, like it gets hit with a deny. Yeah, I don't think Gwen Quinn still exists. I know there was a Gwen deck people have hopped over to. I don't know that it has had the time to show up on ladder yet, so I don't know that we have our Gwen replacement just yet. Like, there's Gwen Quinn, but I'm pretty sure that deck is done. Yeah, I'm pretty sure Gwen Quinn is done. Gwen Quinn. That's just Gwen Quinn again. I still think Gwen is good. And I think Harrowing like didn't rotate, right? I remember for the longest time, like I thought Harrowing rotated, and then I went and looked, and I'm pretty sure it was still there. Gwen Samira, Gwen Diana, Gwen Overwhelm. Maybe we go back to Gwen Sejuani. That was like kind of a deck. It was like hard to justify bringing it because Red Gwen existed, but people were putting up numbers with Gwen Sejuani. Maybe we take a look at that again. I don't know what it lost, but I do think that Gwen Quinn is just does not exist anymore. Yeah, I'll have to take a little bit of a closer look at that and figure out why. Like, did something rotate? Is it a meta shift? Like, why did people suddenly abandon Gwen Sejuani? Because I think that deck was something. It was, not the best Gwen deck, which was the issue, but Alawi Jarvan I think is still fine. Like, I think this is an okay mid-range deck. I think it's a little bit more linear and not as tall as some of the other ones, but it does get the Jarvan the Third, which is like a nice thing. Atro did leave. That's a good point. That's fair. Yeah, Atrocity might have been... that couldn't have been all of it, though, right? Surely it wasn't like just an Atrocity deck. It could have been, though. But maybe everything else lost enough that we can take a look at it again. We haven't really gotten a lot of new Freljord tools, though, so yeah, maybe Gwen's just got to take a backseat until the next round of new cards. Losing Troll Chant was kind of big, I'll give you that. So yeah, Nora Vygar stays, Heimerdier stays. These are kind of our baselines for Shadow Isle control decks. You could put Senna in either one of these, apparently, as people have been kind of... Oh, Ancient Yeti going. Yeah, that's big. Losing Ancient Yeti is big. Like I said, got to take a look at the actual rotation list and figure out what they lost, but Ancient Yeti is a good... Ancient Yeti, Troll Chant, Atrocity is a lot, so that makes sense. But I'm sure someone will start to look at another Gwen build, because I do think the Champion is still solid, even if we don't have, the Rally Scout nonsense that we did previously. So Alawi Jarvan I think stays in tier 3. I think it's just like, it's a very honest mid-range deck. I'm very surprised it put up the numbers that it did at the Runeterra Open, especially through Swiss, but I think what part of that is just, it's almost like old Shen Fiora, where it's a good, honest, straightforward, hard to fuck up mid-range deck that'll get you through the open rounds as long as you are a competent enough player, and then nobody swapped off of it going into Top Cut, and they probably should have, and that is why it had such a high presence, is what I'm telling myself. And by a high presence, I mean like 11 out of 64. So what is that? It's not even 20%? Just shy of 20%? Which granted, that makes not even 20. It's like 15. Either way, more than I expected out of Alawi Jarvan at the Open, and it didn't lose anything here, so I assume that it will still be a relatively represented deck at the tournament. I think it's like a solid, honest, good starting point for people that are like maybe not super confident in their ability. It's kind of where you lean on Alawi Jarvan. The problem is like, You're not going over Deep. You're not going over Malphite. You're not going over Aatrox Vein. You've got some neat tools, but if that one tentacle gets dealt with, you are just dead in the water. Oh, Shen J4. Yeah, people just seem to be back on J4. It just like is the Demacia champion that everyone is taking to the bank here. I mean, honestly, right now, I'm just a pretty big fan of blocking Badger Bear. You show me a Demacia deck, and I'm gonna like it more than I have in the past because I think blocking Badger Bear is just a phenomenal card. I don't think I've been as big on Demacia as I am now, as I have since Petricite Broadwing inherently had Challenger. But even when Petricite Broadwing inherently had Challenger, I think the Demacia deck I was playing the most was like Aphelios Lux, and that deck was kind of insane. And then Petricite Broadwing lost Challenger, and it was just done. And like now we don't have Aphelios or Lux, so it's like, okay. But I think is Alawi Shen better than Alawi Jarvan? In specific matchups, sure, but I don't think that... You know, let's do this. I'm going to put Alawi Jarvan and Alawi Jarvan and Shen J4 next to each other. And this will be a sample for Alawi Jarvan, and then this will be a sample for Shen Jarvan. Just kind of give people the option of like, hey, you have a Jarvan deck that you can bring. Yeah, I think it is a little meta dependent, and I think that Alawi Jarvan is better for the mid-range stuff because you do have the option to have a tentacle get bigger than they can deal with. But Shen Jarvan is probably, you know, a little bit more aggressive, a little bit better into like maybe the Samira stuff, and just having access to the lifesteal, you know, definitely something that you should be keeping in mind. So that's what we'll do. I'll have a sample here for Alawi Jarvan, and then this will link to, you know, a high-ranking Alawi Jarvan player, and then this will be Shen Jarvan. And bada bing, bada boom, we will have options. Sound good? Sounds good. Noxus Leona, yeah, I don't think you're going to see... Like, you probably shouldn't see people here. We've been trying to figure that out. I think Tier 3 is where we put her, because there's just so little information about it, and the lists do look kind of cheesy. And I don't even know, like, which champion split to put on the Tristana, or, like, not even the Tristana, just the Bandle Gunner decks, because you've got, like, Gnar, Teemo, Tristana, I think, like, Teemo, Tristana, no, Narnor is not that. Teemo, Tristana, and then there was, like, Samira, Tristana. So I don't even know which, champion combination to give. I guess I'll just grab, like, the highest win rate one, which is Gnar, Teemo, Tristana, and, like, throw that sample on there. But I'm, like, kind of tentatively putting it in Tier 3. I think the deck definitely has, like, potential to go higher, but for the opening weekend, I'm not expecting, like, a huge breakout performance from this deck. I think people just don't know how to build it yet. And I think this will change. Like, I think you can definitely expect this to change next week. Build is better. Yeah, so I was pretty sure people didn't have the the region combination even down yet. So Kale is the best Kale deck is actually so Leona Samira is the best Targon Noxus deck. But if you're already playing Samira in your lineup, then you would take the Samira out of the Leona and you would put in usually I think like one Kale and one Diana, and that was about as Kale was getting. About as good as Kale was getting. It was like, as the backup Samira deck, we're like, hey, we're playing this, we might as well throw it in, like, Kale, Leona, Samira. Yeah, Kale is, like, still, she's more viable than she's ever been, I would say, which is still the backup plan. Like, you are not running a dedicated Kale Zolani type deck. You are running, like, a deck with Kale in it, because you have a champion spot that's open, and she has quick attack. It's kind of where we landed on her. You know, not what Kale enthusiasts want to be hearing, but... All right. So yeah, outside of that, I don't think there's any other, like... Oh, Pantheon. How do we feel about Pantheon, chat? Someone, like, pitched Pantheon earlier. I think it was General Schwartz, like, pitched Pantheon Samira. And I was like, I don't know about Pantheon Samira, but I feel like there very well could be a Pantheon deck. I'm not super sold on it because I don't think Pantheon gets as tall as he needs to compete with like Deep and Aatrox and all this stuff. Especially because the last Pantheon deck we were looking at, I think, was like Panth Varus, but, you know, people were already sort of dogging Varus because of what the archetype already lost, and I think Momentous Choice was, you know, one of the bigger tools for this. So, like, does anyone have any strong opinions on Pantheon at the moment? Because I'm, like, looking at the stats, I can't base a whole lot off of a deck that 80 people are playing globally. And then what's the next Pantheon deck we have? Pantheon Riven Samira, 60 people globally, 40 people globally. Like, there are 180 Pantheon players in the world. Sorry, 200 Pantheon players in the world. This is probably what I would think would be the Pantheon list. Pansamira borderline tier 1. Bilge Tristana, not in the top 90. I didn't see any Bilgewater Tristana, no. So I don't think it has stats yet, Infinite Patrons. I'm like, my guess is that if any Panth deck is going to show up this weekend, it's probably going to be Demacia. Like, are we going back to Panth Shyvana? Probably not, but I do think that, like, Yuumi Pantheon is, like, where I'd want to be. God, honestly, I would have to, like, I still have, oh, God. This feels like it invalidates so much of what I was just saying when you, like, look at the top performer on the deck and there's just a judgment in there. It's like, all right, never mind. Throw the whole deck out the window. We can't base anything off of this. But the point I was going to make is that, like, I still haven't fully digested rotation because, like, just so many things rotated. You can look at the list all you want and things are still going to slip through the cracks. I got to go back and kind of look at, like, what self-targeting tools you're still getting out of each region, but Demacia does seem to be, like, I would assume Demacia is the best Pantheon variant. Probably Yuumi. And then I haven't, like, I've seen very little Pantheon Samira. When I saw it, it was when, you know, it was pre-nerf. So, like, it was just the worst Samira deck. So it was kind of hard to tell because I was watching it play into, like, a lot of other Samira decks, and it's like, okay, I'm like, not getting a good semblance of where this deck actually stands right now. But on paper, I still feel like Pantheon is just not getting tall enough to compete with, like, Deep Tilium Malphite and Aatrox Vein quick enough. But I do think that with Karma Set kind of getting knocked down a peg, in the department of, like, Caustic Rift going up, which was sort of one of their big spell shield poppers across multiple units, like, that was their easiest way to do it. You know, outside of that, you're looking at, like, 6 mana to, like, Mystic Shot Conch Palm, or, like, 7 mana to Mystic Shot Tag Out. Like, that feels way too heavy for them to consistently keep up with Pantheon Samira. The issue is that, like, one, is Karma Set going to be popular enough that that is even a viable strategy should it be, you know, should what I'm saying be accurate, on top of the fact of, like, does that even work? Can you even aggro out the Karma Setter? Like, if they push through, you know, they spend 6 mana to stun your one faded unit with Overwhelm, like, is that just enough to stop you until they can get to turn 10? I just don't know if Control is going to be popular enough for you to do this. And, like, I'm sure you can beat Samira decks, but I'm sure it still comes down to, like, Pantheon rolling Lifesteal, which is, you know, that's been the story of Pantheon in a couple of situations. I think Pantheon, you know, I will put Pantheon in tier 3. But it's sort of like the Bandle Gunner thing, where it's like, I am sure that there is a viable version of Pantheon. I just don't know what it is. And no one seems to have, sorry, not no one. No large group of people seem to have a consensus on what the Pantheon deck is. I've heard a couple of different opinions from, like, all the Europeans seem to be saying it's Samira Pantheon. The stats don't back that up in the slightest, which is all I can really go off of is, like, what people in chat are saying and the stats. And there's just not enough stats on it. But I am willing to think that, like, there is a Pantheon deck out there. Maybe not this week, but maybe in the coming weeks, you know, as the meta defines itself a little bit better and, like, Pantheon just ends up doing better. But Pantheon is definitely something that I want to keep on my radar, and I would like to put on the radar of other people of, like, hey, you know, maybe not this week, but maybe relatively soon, Pantheon's going to be something that, like, could be popping up more and more as people figure it out. I think Bandle Gunner is, like, it's hard to tell if this one is a flash in the pan or if it's here to stay. But, you know, time will tell on that one. And this is why, like, day one tier lists are always so rough, is because usually when you get new decks, they're not, like, clear cut popping up. It's like, yeah, eventually one of these might be playable. When is the next open? Is it in, like, is it in 2 weeks? Or is it in 3 weeks? Is it the 13th? Is that the open? Does anyone know? Because I don't think I can look it up. I don't think they have the dates of all of them, or if they have, they've like shifted 2 week cycle. Okay, so the 13th, and then so if it's a 2 week cycle, then like 13th, and then I guess the 31st will get a balance patch, and then the 17th will be cool. Okay, yeah, that's what I was when you guys said 2 week cycle. That's kind of what I was thinking. Okay, cool. Okay, because I'm going away from like the first weekend of July, and now I was worried that like this would be an open, but I think this is going to be a balance patch week, and I get back on the 4th, so I'll even be here for the balance patch. So that's good to know. Yeah. Okay. So that I mean, that looks good to me. Like I said, I will go back and update the samples off stream, just because that's a very boring and repetitive process. But I'm feeling pretty good about this tier list. And, you know, as I'm editing this tonight, maybe there'll be another deck that I see, or like we'll just get a better idea. Like more stats will pop up between like today and tomorrow when I'm going to like finalize everything, and like another deck might appear on the tier list of like, hey, we actually got some stats on this, or like I figured out what the Bandle Gunner build is, or like I figured out what the Pantheon build is. But that is going to do it for me today. Thank you all so much for your participation in this event. And at the very least, I will be back next Thursday to do this again. I am going to go ahead and send you over to someone else. Probably Shihu. No, I got to support an American player. It's Blue God. Sending you to Blue God. We don't have any stats on Bandle Gunner. I don't know if you mean it should be higher, or if it shouldn't be on here at all, Oven Master. But a lot of top players seem to be experimenting with it. And it's like some Tristana something with mites. I don't know if you think it should be higher or lower, but that's where we're kind of landing on it, just because there is not enough information on this deck to like have a hard stance on it. It's really kind of like Pantheon and Bandle Gunner are both kind of like a take a wait and see approach for this weekend. But I really can't like hard endorse either one of them. I think there's potential there, but that's all it really is potential. All right, I am going to send you fine folks over to Blue God. This will be up on my YouTube channel tomorrow, which is Boulevard TCG. And follow me on Twitter at casterboulevard. And I will see you all in minimum in 1 week when I do this again, but I'll probably stream before then. Thank you all so much for watching and participating. This has actually been a lot more fun than doing it on my own. So go send Blue God some love, and I will see you all soon.